Well, with that, let us get started. We've lost a little bit of time, but that hopefully allowed everybody to come on board as well. So, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you all. It's a real pleasure to welcome you on behalf of all the co-organizers to this opening session of the second Cities and Regions Summit held in the context of the UN Environment Assembly. A bit of housekeeping about the platform. Live interpretation is available throughout this event in English, French, and Spanish, in Mandarin in some sections. The speakers and audience can choose the preferred language channel by clicking on the drop-down menu called Floor. You see it right on top of basically on top of my head on your screen. And the speakers will intervene in different languages, so please select your preferred language to listen to the interpretation. And while our audience today is in listening mode, both speakers and listeners can use the chat function. And the main chat is public, but speakers can click on a specific user and open thereby a private chat. And our technician is on standby. His name is Dimitri, and you can connect him for tech support in the very same way. And now let me acknowledge properly our summit co-organizers. And here we have our city networks with C40 cities, Global Covenant of Mayors, ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, and United Cities and Local Governments. Our nature partners are the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the World Wildlife Fund, and the World Resources Institute. We have the Global Environment Facility, that enables developing countries to invest in nature and supports the implementation of major international environmental conventions, including the ones on biodiversity and climate. And we have our fellow UN agencies, UN Habitat and the Food and Agriculture Organization, as well as the UN Development Program. So you see a broad group of organizations that has come together, but it reflects very well how important the collaboration on this is and how much the topic that we have on our collective agenda is important for all of us. I am Martina Otto. I'm heading the work on cities in the UN Environment Program, and I'll be moderating this first session. And really, today's summit is hosted as part of the fifth session of the UN Environment Assembly, which is taking place next week in Nairobi, alongside the celebrations of UNEP's 50th birthday. The overall theme for UNEA 5 is strengthening actions for nature to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And this highlights really the pivotal role nature plays in our lives and for our development. It is an opportunity for UN member states to share best practices. It will create momentum and catalyze impact on multilateral environmental efforts to protect and restore the natural world on which our economies and societies depend. There will also be a ministerial declaration being put together. And we started the tradition of a city summit at UNEA 4. And you'll notice the evolution. This year's edition is Cities and Regions Summit. And it's really important to recognize all the levels of subnational governance. Why a Cities and Regions Summit at the UN Environment Assembly, you may ask, as this is the highest level decision-making body for the environment, enjoying universal membership with 193 UN member states. Well, it's to recognize the subnational leadership that it has emerged, and we want to make sure as well that the subnational voices are heard across regions and continents. To this effect, we will also put together at the end of this session an official outcome document that will be brought to UNEA, and we also have a short moment of reporting back in the closing plenary of UNEA as well. Now, to make an effective contribution to UNEA, we usually link the topic of this gathering with the theme of UNEA. And while cities and nature may be a bit counterintuitive in the first instance, clearly it is in cities that humanity can start to truly make peace with nature. We may currently see cities as centers of biodiversity loss and pollution, but it does not always have to be that way. And many cities and regions are really proving it. Today, we look forward to a conversation with local and national leaders, leading experts, and international governments who invest in nature and who challenge us to collectively flip the script to see cities as champions of nature and to enable subnational leaders to fully act as accelerators of a sustainable future. Without further ado, it is my honor and my pleasure to introduce the first of today's speakers, and that's Maimouna Mot Sharif, the Executive Director of UN Habitat and Undersecretary General of the United Nations.
Honorable Ministers and Mayors, Madam Inga Anderson, the Executive Director of UNEP, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to join my colleagues Mauricio Villadosa, Governor of the State of Yucatan, and Ilso Metchin, Mayor of Kazan, and the Presidents of United Cities and Local Governments in opening this summit. Our collective goal today is to flip the script so that cities work with nature rather than against it. When it comes to environmental challenges, cities can be more than simply culprits and victims. They can take responsibility for their actions, pay attention to their metabolisms, and limit their footprints. Cities remain at the forefront of our most complex and interconnected challenges. Urban leaders around the world have already taken impressive steps towards addressing resilience, equity, and environmental sustainability. However, truly flipping the script means addressing how cities function and evolve, who participates and benefits, and how our collective metabolism affect wider ecological systems. Ultimately, cities need efficient form and circular flows. With them, they can better protect and restore our natural environment. Though I cannot join you in person, I am excited for the 3 conversations that are about to take place. Each will present a concrete vision of what a more sustainable city can be. Resilient cities protect vulnerable urban places and populations from environmental degradation, climate change impacts, and natural disasters. Inclusive cities encourage less wasteful individuals and institutional behaviors and a just relationship between cities and their hinterlands. Circular cities modify their energy and material flows to reduce resource extraction and curtail pollution release into ecosystems. These 3 visions, if realized, would take us a long way. The new urban agenda also provides actionable solutions for a diversity of cities. With their inspiration, UN Habitat will continue to champion SDG 11, will contribute to building resilient, inclusive, and sustainable cities and communities for all. Thank you.
Well, with that, thank you really to Maimouna for this personal leadership. Unfortunately, she was not able to be with us today, but really her personal leadership as well as that of UN Habitats in driving the Sustainable Cities agenda. And I think you've seen on the program, Ilsa Metsin, the mayor of Kazan, announced, she not only the mayor of Kazan, but also the president of UCLG. And we had a last minute change in the program. And up next, we have representing the United Cities and Local Governments, Madame Valérie Dumontet, the vice president of the Council Départemental of Aude, and she is with us today, and we're very pleased to have her with us today. So I would like to give you the floor.
I'll be starting, and I will be speaking in front of dear representatives of both genders of the member states, dear general director, dear colleagues, mayors and governors, dear friends of the global task force. It's a pleasure for me to be here today as of this opening ceremony of the 10th session of the Cities and Regions Summit, having had the pleasure of being here before. My intervention in the name of my entity will be to bear witness to a very efficient role in the representation of territories in this special agenda on climate. If member states are responsible to determine priorities for sustainable development and to service the purpose of combating climate change, it is to be by being local that we are able to further pursue such goals. The implication of regional governments and local entities pays witness to the importance of our role in the process. This summit of cities and regions will be the opportunity of pursue and consolidate the multi-level dialogue towards exploring innovative and impactful solutions. Being able to exchange on such solutions will be the possibility for us to discuss the future of our territories in order to create truly livable, inclusive, and sustainable premises, spaces, and areas. We need to appropriate the SDGs as the basis of this summit in this bottom-up approach, and not in a silo way of parachuting ourselves in a subject matter. Technical constraints in the process towards sustainable development should be determined, identified, and tackled. We also need to tackle political issues. It will be thanks to the will of the politicians, of all stakeholders, that we will be able to put in place a program under which cities and territories will be very inclusive. Nobody will be left behind. Local entities will see that worldwide agendas will be collectively assumed, and territories will not be reduced to being the witnesses. We should be those who take the initiative to ensure the ecological transition of our territories, which goes beyond the attenuation of climatic change in order to attain true transformation of our habits in consumption and production and that of the citizens. And we should be working in conjunction with nature. We should be prioritizing the respect of nature by way of solutions based on nature to improve resilience and the quality of life, as well as to ensure a sustainable future for the humanity. The Paris Convention on Climate will be inspiring us and will do anything in our power to improve situation. To do so, we need to have your commitment, very clear-cut commitment on the part of all stakeholders at the highest level possible, the UN being no less. The cities and the local governments entities, all of us are committed to combat air pollution and work territorially together in order to come up with solutions based on nature and to reinforce the bonds rurally and at the city level in order to create good ecosystems and to secure biodiversity. The 2030 project action plans, the new urban agenda, the Paris Convention, and all other initiatives all acknowledge the role that we may play, locally speaking. But by so doing and by hosting events like these today, we will be enforcing the dialogue with all stakeholders and national governments at all levels in Africa and elsewhere in order to ensure the future we need and we want for our future, for our communities. Time presses. We need a leadership that is truly inspiring. We need the participation of citizens. We need to have an indivisible governance at all levels, institutionally, adequately, in order to appropriate worldwide programs. Local governments do not have solutions to all problems, but I'm certain these are truly my words that we are part of the solution, not of the problem. If we liaise, we will be able to undertake our role of being the guardians and the warrantors of the worldwide agenda. We are encouraging a positive transformation of the multilateral system with full participation of all stakeholders at the local level, regional level, national level, and worldwide level. There are no excuses. Locally speaking, we will be transforming our food systems, treating waste appropriately, and have an integrated approach towards creating communities that are truly healthy. There is urgency in that, and we'll do everything in our power to do so. Local and regional governments, we will be making our commitment quite visible and audible, and our communities will be echoing our hope to materialize in the future the project of sustainable cities sustainable territories. We're ready to act. We're ready to face the future, ready to become the actors of transformation we need in order to leave no one behind. Thank you very much for your attention.
On vous remercie beaucoup pour votre intervention.
Thank you very much for your intervention, madam. It was wonderful, a very powerful message that you have sent forward, and this is what echoes the willpower and the desire you have to play a very central role. Thank you very much for your intervention, for having been here with us this morning.
I would like to just maybe quickly outline that we will now go into the 3 subsequent sessions to hear from local government leaders, national champions, and distinguished experts. They will share with us their experiences, telling their stories of multiple benefits of nature for cities, but also go a little bit into the barriers that they have been and are facing. And together we will seek to identify key levers to accelerate implementation from local to global, from policy to finance, and to really help increase the scale of the many good initiatives that are blooming across the world. And I had meant to give a bit of a UNEP perspective, but the time is such that that doesn't quite work. But I just want to briefly highlight that UNEP has been supporting the Italian G20 presidency the last year with a report that looked at harnessing the power of nature-based solutions for sustainable, smart, and resilient cities. And we did come across more and more cities understanding the value of bringing nature into the cities, the multiple benefits of that. We found also more and more evidence that turning to nature also makes business sense. There is a business model to be drawn out, and there's compelling numbers that are being put forward, but it requires a mindset change and a real valorization of nature as assets. And only if we get to that with nature accounting, we can actually fully harness the business models and the power that we see here, and to unlock the investments, the financing. And maybe one last word on that. The Cscaf, the Global Environment Facility, and the Green Climate Fund, and both of which we will hear later today, they're showing tremendous interest and support already with their programs. But we need to close the gap in investments and finance for nature-based solutions by also persuading the mainstream finance that this is, they become more familiar with the ins and outs of financing green infrastructure, as they are much more familiar with the gray infrastructure. So there's a mindset issue as well. And if you talk about mindset, I think we have had a big wake-up call with COVID-19, and we're still in the midst of the pandemic. And it's been a stark reminder of how important it is to conserve natural habitats, and to reduce our footprints on nature by changing our consumption and production patterns, but also to make space for nature in and around cities, also for livability and people's well-being. And I just wanted to leave you with that thought as we go into our discussions. And it's really about flipping the script by changing this paradigm away from carving out a space for humans outside of nature to planning, designing, and managing our cities and regions with nature. And with that, I would like to close the opening and hand over to our moderator for the first thematic session, and that's Jenny Lenhardt, who is the global lead of WWF Cities. And this first thematic session will center on urban nature-based solutions to counter climate risk and limit global warming. And after that first thematic session, we will have a 90-minute break and then reconvene for a second thematic session that will look at leveraging sustainable food systems for nature-positive cities. And we will then move to a last panel on scaling up the solutions to harness the power of nature in cities. And I really hope that we can count on your participation until the end of this day's program, by using the very same link that you've used to join here. So with that, Jenny, please, over to you.
Wonderful. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, this is a bit of adaptive management, and we should be well versed in this now, especially countering all the challenges that we've faced in the last year with COVID and climate change, etc. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, dear colleagues. My name is Jennifer Lenhart, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this first session of the Cities and Regions Summit, which, as Martina has said, is focused on nature-based solutions, urban nature-based solutions to counter climate risks and to limit global warming. I will be moderating this session, and we have a wonderful group of speakers, so I'm very happy to be with you here today. Just as a technical reminder, I will repeat some of the information that Martina has suggested. There is live interpretation throughout this event. So just above my face where it says floor, you can click on either English, French, Spanish, and in some sections there will even be Mandarin. So do take note of that. Speakers and audience can choose your preferred audio channel just above my head here. All speakers will be allowed to participate and engage. As the audience, you are welcome to use the chat function. Finally, to help our dear interpreters who are making this session a global engagement, please remember speakers to speak slowly, and I should remind myself that as well, just so that we can fully grasp the full reach of what you have to say. Just a few brief remarks from me before handing over to our keynote and our fantastic speakers. I just wanted to echo the report that Martina had mentioned for the G20. It is a fantastic report, and I hope that the organizers can put it into the chat box. To frame this session, I just want to say that, cities are spaces of challenge and change. Urban areas sit at the forefront of both nature and biodiversity loss, waste and pollution, and certainly climate change. And when it comes to climate change, cities are heating at about 2 times the global average, due in part to urban heat island effect. And by 2100, in a business as usual scenario, cities could warm by up to 4.4 degrees Celsius without intervention. And this has huge and catastrophic impacts for health, for efforts to address resilience, if we do not tackle the problem. The good news is cities are taking on this challenge, and I can just say from WWF's perspective, we've seen this time and again, in part through our One Planet City Challenge, where last year we engaged with over 280 cities. Many of those cities are working towards alignment to the Paris Agreement, as well as engaging in activities including on urban nature-based solutions, urban food systems, and all the wonderful categories that Martina mentioned. So the importance in cities really is to counter the climate risk, to beat the heat, and address how are we going to tackle some of these challenges that are coming into our cities, and the important role of nature in doing so. And investing in nature in our cities is not just about tackling climate change, but also tackling pollution and also increasing quality of life. The benefits of investing in this nature are far-reaching for our planet, our people, and our economy, and are being encompassed by a growing number of cities. I just want to give you 2 statistics before I hand over. Investing in $100 million annually in street trees, so $100 million, can lead to improvements for the lifestyle of 77 million people, reducing heat temperature rise of about 1 degree Celsius on extreme heat days. There are well-documented case studies. I want to just point out one, which is kind of a flagship city. Medellin in Colombia has invested in 36 green corridors, reducing heat by about 4 degrees Celsius, and also employing 75 local people. Green roofs are another great way to do this. We've seen this in a lot of cities, reducing heat by about 10 to 15%, and I think we're going to have a great case on that from Athens later on. So I'm going to stop there, and with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our first of today's speakers, which is Stuart McGuinness, the Deputy Director General for the International Union for Conservation and Nature. A great friend of WWF as well. Stuart, the floor is yours for an opening keynote, if I can see if you're...
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jennifer, for that kind introduction. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, it's great to be here. And I would really like to begin with a big shout out to UNEP for its leadership and commitment in organising this city summit in the heart of UNEA. Now, I don't think I need to convince many of you that cities are central to the success of the Sustainable Development Agenda. It is in cities where well over half the world's population live. It is in cities where political power resides and financial capital concentrates. And ultimately, it is in cities where, day by day, our collective future is being written. For those in search of a better life, cities represent opportunity. The promise of greater freedom, tolerance and equality, education and employment, innovation and excitement. In my lifetime, two great demographic trends have unfolded together. In 1963, when I was born, 2/3 of the global population was rural and 2/3 of the global population lived in poverty. Now, even when we acknowledge all the usual caveats of causation and correlation and coincidence, there is still little doubt that urbanization and the processes associated with it have provided a pathway out of poverty for hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of people, and we should celebrate that. Nevertheless, those development gains are not cost-free. The sheer speed and scale of urbanization has also created immense challenges: congestion, pollution, waste, unplanned development, overworked infrastructure, and strained service delivery. And that's before we factor in the uncertainty and elevated risks of climate change and the associated impacts of drought, heat stress, rising seas and storm surges, floods, and landslides, as we witnessed in Petropolis just last week. I'm sure my fellow panelists will agree that future-proofing our cities is now an imperative of the very highest order. Fortuitously, nature is a strong and resilient ally in this endeavour. Trees mop up pollutants, dampen noise and cool air. Wetlands and rain gardens, and on the coasts, mangroves and marshes buffer storms and sudden inundations and thereby reduce flood risks. National parks and forests and upper catchment areas store and clean cities' drinking water. Greenways make low-cost exercise and by extension healthy lifestyles accessible to many. And green spaces facilitate recreation and community interaction. All of these are examples of nature-based solutions. In recent years, IUCN has worked to define and popularise the concept, not least by developing a global standard, which we have now begun implementing in cities. And yet, I suspect that the full potential of nature-based solutions to the challenges of urban growth and development has barely been explored. According to a recent study by the World Economic Forum, nature-based solutions are, on average, 50% more cost-effective than standalone grey alternatives and deliver 28% more added value. Yet last year, they received just 0.3% of overall spending on urban infrastructure. We can and we must do better. That is why our union, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, recently created a new membership category for subnational governments, paving the way for the voices of cities and regions not only to be heard by the conservation community, but to actively help shape the future of conservation as a cornerstone of sustainable development. And that is why we have now been seeking to provide cities with expertise, capacity building, and tools to upscale nature-based solutions and integrate biodiversity effectively into urban strategies, plans, and actions. I wish to conclude with three messages. Firstly, this is urgent. The resilience of our global life support system is being tested as never before. Make no mistake, a global climate and ecological emergency is already with us, and every decision, every action counts. We must act now, and we must act boldly. Secondly, you have agency. Whether you're an architect or an engineer, a planner or a designer, an investor or developer, a politician or practitioner, or just an ordinary citizen, you can make a valuable contribution in deploying nature-based solutions to help future-proof your city. For example, Prioritize and protect critical ecosystems located within urban and peri-urban boundaries, or systematically explore and deploy nature-based solutions as part of a city's infrastructure investments. Or you could adopt nature inclusive design principles to help bring biodiversity back into cities. Or you could use your influence with your constituencies to foster pro-environmental attitudes and help citizens reconnect to nature. And finally, whole of society transformative changes demand radical new partnerships. That means getting out of our comfort zones, reaching beyond our sector, bridging divides and building coalitions. Youth and community groups, Indigenous peoples, every sphere of government, businesses large and small, we all have common cause in addressing the challenges and opportunities of 21st century urban-based society. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to reimagine our cities as living, breathing, regenerative systems. It is time to build an ecological civilization. Thank you very much.
Absolutely brilliant, Stuart. I was quickly writing a few notes down here. Too many good things that you said to repeat, but I just want to echo your 3 points in ending. Urgency, engagement, it's up to us as individuals, but we also need a whole of society approach. I couldn't have stated it better. And from WWF side, we've so enjoyed working with IUCN and the work that you've been doing to really push nature-based solutions. So thank you so much. Extremely inspiring first remarks. And from there, it is my great pleasure now to introduce you to our first panel. We will be joined by several experts and local leaders. First, we will hear from Mayor Dieudonné Bantsimba, who is the mayor of Brazzaville in the Republic of Congo. From there, we will go to Supriya Suru, the Principal Secretary of Environment, Climate Change and Forest of the government of Tamil Nadu in India. We will then hear from Eleni Leniu Mireivili, who is the Chief Heat Officer from the fantastic city of Athens in Greece. And last but not least, Ming Jiang, who is the Deputy Director for Development and Reform Commission in Chengdu City, China. So we are kind of going all over the globe here. And first, I would be greatly pleased to ask the Mayor of Brazzaville a quick question about your fantastic city. Today, 70% of the Congolese population live in cities. With rapid urbanization, cities like Brazzaville feel climate change effects more intensively than other parts of the world. What steps is the city taking to protect its citizens and infrastructure from climate impacts by using nature? What are the key benefits, challenges, and opportunities of these actions? And I'll remind all of our listeners that the dear mayor will speak in French, so please choose your language of choice just above my head. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Merci.
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you. It's a great honor to address to this forum. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me. Indeed, we are under pressure. So the first thing is that the urban development has both positive and negative impact. Brazzaville, as you mentioned, encounters problems given the high number of populations. The majority of Congolese live in Brazzaville. And in our part of the world, climate change is felt heavily. So you were asked what measures the city has been taken to protect its citizens from climate change, measures based on nature. The challenge we are faced, given the urbanization, is to control the level of pollutions. We have water, landslides, and other disaster. As you may know, the city is built on a ground that is made of sand, so it moves easily. So landslides are our problem, and they have been increasing due to climate change. So we needed to act. The municipality has taken strong and strict measures. Decrees to forbid the productions or importing plastic bags, for instance, to reduce pollution. Plastic bags that we used to find in supermarkets or shops. Plastic bags are a source of pollutions of our water, and they are not biodegradable. So to avoid plastic bag pollutions, we forbid it. That is a law that has been taken at the city level in order to protect the environment. Another initiative is the approval of a framework for Brazzaville to try and protect our environment. This framework underline the protection of the environment, reforestation, to plant trees and create green areas in the city. The aim is to, how could I say? The aim was to reduce pollution, and therefore 14 hectares were established as a reserve. It's a city forest in the heart of the city to provide more oxygen to the city. Regarding fighting against pollution in our city, we also try to raise awareness with our population. We required our citizens to build facilities for used waters, so that to avoid used waters to be thrown out to the streets. So this is a requirement imposed for building. And also general waste and waste garbage collection. We have improved our installations in order to recycle waste, solid waste. In order to avoid to discourage people from throwing waste everywhere in the nature. So we have landfills. We don't want our city to be polluted. We also have built infrastructure to process waste, to recycle them. For instance, we created recycled we created bricks made of recycled plastic. So plastic bags were recycled into bricks that we used to lay pathways in the cities. We also used organic waste to avoid them polluting the soil. We reuse organic waste to different applications. That helped us build pathways and roads. So these are a few uses that we have made from recycled waste. In agriculture as well, we promote urban agriculture and discourage people from using herbicides or chemicals. These are a few examples of initiatives that have been implemented in our city. And each time there is a new building, we require that new trees are planted. Um, and we have renamed our city as Brazzaville, the green city, because there are so many trees in Brazzaville that each time an entrepreneur wants to build infrastructure, he needs to plant new trees elsewhere in the city to compensate for the loss of trees. And this is in order to protect the erosion, the soil erosions. This is our main challenge. The sand where we stand on is very vulnerable to landslides. So reforestation and planting new trees for us is a priority. We have to preserve our soils. Let me come back to water cleaning. We are working with a trade union with a view to recycle used water. Currently, used waters are thrown in our rivers without any treatment. Now, what we want is to have zero pollution in our waterways, and every used water needs to go through a processing before it is thrown back into the river. The same goes with composting for organic waste. We want to foster urban agriculture. And again, we are treating used water with light before the water goes back to our river flows. This is what we are doing in Brazzaville in order to preserve the quality of life for our citizens in Brazzaville. The aim being to try and reduce floods and natural disasters and landslides.
Thank you so much. So many interesting things that your city is involved in Brazzaville. Unfortunately, because we started a little bit late and we have quite a lot of impressive speakers, I will have to stop it there. But I just wanted to laud you and congratulate you on all the fantastic things you are doing, from the city forest at the heart of your city to addressing urban agriculture and soil erosion. Thank you so much for bringing up soil, because this is such a critical issue that is not often taken up. So thank you for your leadership and for joining us here today. I would now like to turn to Subraya Saru and to say that cities in Tamil Nadu are already facing challenges such as drought, floods, and extreme heat. How are cities using nature to tackle the impacts and to mitigate emissions? And as a state government, how are you enabling them to make this effort? How important is, in your view, are the interactions between the local and regional levels of government? And I will just remind you, we're trying to keep our intervention short. You all have wonderful things to say, such as the mayor. So I'm so sorry to interrupt, but just to take note of the time to respect also our audience. So if we could actually now go over to Lenio and to talk about your role as the Chief Heat Officer for Athens. And just to ask you a few questions. You were tasked with finding ways to help the Greek capital cope with ever hotter heat waves that are expected for years to come. What is the role of nature in your plans in order to beat the heat in your city? Lenio, over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you very much for the invitation to the UNEA Citizen Region Summit. I'm very honored to be among the esteemed speakers and organizers. Jennifer, also I want to thank you because the way that you opened this discussion today really put heat as one of the major problems that cities are facing, which is true, and we've come late to the realization of it, even though we've been talking about global warming for several decades. Actually focusing our efforts and to the challenge that heat is bringing to cities and to a lot of unequally to a lot of different parts of the populations of cities is a very, very important issue that now we're kind of running. We're in a race, and to directly respond to your question, nature is the basic, the only, and the most important solution for cities dealing with heat. We have other technical things that can also support us, like, as you mentioned, whitewashing different dark surfaces from asphalt to terraces, but none of them have really the effects that nature can bring. If we sit under a tree, anybody who has ever sat under a tree can say attest to that, because of course of evapotranspiration, and it's not just the shade, but it's actually kind of cooling us in from evaporation, which is the amazing things that trees do. So Athens is part of has been very inspired. So we stand on the shoulders of giants because other cities have done amazing things, and we are learning and being inspired from them. And we belong to two big networks, which we've been working with very kind of closely. One is C40 and the Cool Cities Network, which we've learned a lot through. And the other one is the Resilient Cities Network, where we've been working with a lot of cities, figuring out what each one of us is doing and what works and what doesn't work. So I'll just quickly kind of talk a little bit about the stuff that we are trying to do. We've been working on in Athens. Again, you mentioned Medellin with the green corridors. Green corridors is one of the major things that cities can do with nature, because the idea of the corridor moves air masses better, allows for air to circulate, but also it helps with biodiversity and helps like with the health of the green elements of nature itself. So green corridors that many cities have done, Athens has been working on as well with a big with an instrument that we got from, it's called the NCFF, Nature Capital Finance Facility, that we got through the European Investment Bank. So this, with some technical assistance that they gave us, we are preparing 3 big corridors that are connecting green spaces, because that's the other really important part of green corridors, to connect existing green spaces. In Athens, they're small. We should do much larger. And again, one of the main challenges is to change the culture of the people and build capacity through them, both in the public sector, but also in the private sector, of how to start thinking of and figuring out how to build green infrastructure and blue infrastructure instead of gray, because gray, they automatically go towards gray because they've known how to do it, and it's really difficult. Even in the private sector, I was hoping the private sector would be helping us build capacity in the public sector, but even the private sector needs a lot of learning that has to happen, again, from other cities and from maybe international firms that come in as consultants. I mean, it's a race, because we really need nature fast, as the esteemed speaker who spoke before, Stuart, kind of mentioned. It's an urgent issue. Secondly, we're doing with private-public partnerships small pocket parks as much as we can, because Athens, like many cities in the Mediterranean and around the world, is very densely built. It doesn't have the large kind of spaces that a lot of more modern cities have. So in very densely built and densely populated cities, it's a big challenge to find spaces to bring nature into the city. And I'll come back to this at the very end. The other thing that we have been focusing on is supporting existing green areas, but bringing in the consultations and workshops with the citizens. So there is again a building of knowledge and building of capacity of how important it is and what the benefits, the co-benefits and the large spectrum of benefits from economic to health, having a healthy nature and biodiversity in a city kind of supports the city in all of its aspects. So we did this with this urban forest called Lycabetus, which is in the center of the city. We did this with 2,000 stakeholders and the major University of Athens and the Rebuild by Design from New York. And so we did a really big consultation, which had to do, the first things that we did, Jennifer, you will be happy to hear, had to do with land erosion. And because of course, because of flash floods and heat, there is this is a very big issue as well in our green spaces. And finally, the most, I'll finish with that because it's a very interesting work. We have a beautiful, an incredible engineering feat from the Roman times in Athens, which is 20 kilometers long. It's an aqueduct which runs from a peri-urban forest, one of the hills surrounding Athens, to the center of Athens. And it was used in the Roman times to bring water to Athens. And it's been used on and off through the centuries, but it hasn't been used for several decades, even though it actually has a lot of water in it, which is good, clean water, which has been, I'm talking about like 1.5 million cubic meters of waters per year that is thrown into the sewage and the sea. So we are harnessing, we're now planning a whole big kind of plan which engages 4 different municipalities in the region of Attica to kind of support nature-based design throughout, on top of this aqueduct, using the water of the aqueduct that will again replenish the aquifer, which is being kind of depleted by it. So to finish, I'm coming back to the fact that we are a very densely populated city and very densely built, and all these cities are so badly built. All of the cities that have kind of forgotten all of the old ways of building and have been dealing with kind of based on fossil fuel heating and cooling have become heat traps that really the populations that live in them very, again, unequally are very challenged by it. What I wanted to say is that we are in the process, and a lot of cities are doing this, in the process of reclaiming the streets from the cars. And I think that this is my last point and the most, I think, important thing that I want to kind of finish with, is that together with the whole mitigation efforts and kind of getting cars out of the streets and getting out of the idea of 1 car per person, we really, really have to reclaim for our cities the public space and really radically bring nature into our cities, as in like creating forests with really creating the capacity also for small forests to thrive in cities by allowing the soil and the underground to give them the support that they need. And we need them more than we've ever done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Another inspiring, my notes are very messy and long here, but I absolutely love everything you said on so many different aspects. I mean, density is an issue we need to address. We've seen time and again around the world the problem of urban sprawl into the nature areas and the periphery surrounding our cities. So we really need density, but we also need to tackle it in a smart and sustainable way. I love what you said about reclaiming the streets from cars, and that just made my heart sing. At WWF, we've been talking a lot about streets and cities for people and nature first. It's not about no cars, but it's about putting people and nature first. So thank you so much for all of your remarks, for your leadership, and it's really been a huge pleasure. Thank you so much, Eleni, and I look forward to going back to your city again. It is such a beautiful city, and to see all the work that you've done. Thank you. And now I see that we have been thankfully joined by Subraya. So I will just ask the question to you again. Such a pleasure to see you. Cities in Tamil Nadu are already facing challenges such as drought, floods, and extreme heat. How are cities using nature in your region to tackle these impacts and mitigate efforts? How important is your view about the interaction between the local and regional government levels? And this would be very interesting since we've had two local leaders talk about. So now, how does the link between the local and regional come into play? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I'm very happy to, be given this opportunity to talk to you and everybody about this. I hope I'm audible. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I wanted to talk about the nature-based solutions that we are taking for our city, like Chennai, which is a densely populated city with a population of something like 11.5 million. And you can see that, the kind of challenge that we have in the city, as you rightly mentioned. Of late, we have been seeing floods, and we are seeing some kind of a heat island effect, of course, and the emission is the fossil fuel emissions is also a very big challenge to the city. But to add to it, we are a coastal city, and that again makes the city highly vulnerable, because if the city's water bodies are not restored to their original, and if it is not properly aligned with the kind of natural the flow, all cities are bound to have these kind of challenges. So Chennai is not an exception, and Chennai has been facing this kind of a climate challenge for quite some time now. So I would like to come back to the solution, because here we are here to talk about the action that we are doing. So in fact, I'm very happy and proud to say that we have government of Tamil Nadu has taken up a very significant project of cleaning up and completely restoring three important rivers in Chennai. These three rivers are absolutely essential because as they flow towards the sea, over a period of time, they have got sedimented. They have suffered because of lack of the proper solid waste management, as usual, as it happens in cities, and the free flow of garbage and throw of garbage in the cities. So in a very unique public-private partnership initiative, government has set up something called as a river restoration trust. It's a Chennai River Restoration Trust, and this trust has taken up the three major rivers of the city to kind of be completely restoring to their original habitat. And this is at the cost of something close to about 200 million US dollars is what we are investing in cleaning up this entire river network. Not only that, we have also come out with a very unique plan of in fact, first let me tell you that we have one of the South Asia's largest wetland, which is located very much within the city. But unfortunately, the wetland has been encroached over a period of time. Sewage has been flowing into it. As a result, the biodiversity has been getting hampered. But all that is getting arrested. Government has come out with a big restoration plan for this entire marshland. It's one of the most significant marshlands in this part of the country because it hosts a wide variety of birds, insects, and as well as the flora and fauna. So we have recently restored about a large part of the entire marshland, and we have created an eco park for people to enjoy, to walk, and kind of get some good air, clean air. We personally believe that the restoration must be done in close partnership with the local communities. So after we have restored this particular marshland, we have constituted a committee of the local people who would be responsible to maintain this for years to come, so that they take the ownership, they feel they are a part of the entire project, and they can go ahead. So this is the second thing I wanted to talk about. The third thing we are doing is that we are doing the legacy waste biomining in a very big way. In fact, this is one of the major problems all over the world, but more so in Indian cities, because somehow the planning with regard to the waste management, it really needs to take off in a very big way, so that the waste is not dumped into the water bodies and the waste is actually properly biomined, because the waste has got lots of uses which many local bodies are not able to realize. So we need to support them. But government has taken several steps in the direction in many parts of India, and also in Tamil Nadu. The state government of Tamil Nadu has taken up a massive biomining project of the legacy waste, which lies very close to the water bodies here in Chennai. So, but apart from that, I think I would like to stop here to say that these three significant steps I wanted to highlight today in our talk to begin with.
Brilliant comments, and I could see that there were quite a few people in the chat that were excited to hear you as well. So, and after hearing you, I can totally agree. So many things that you said really struck out to me. I want to note one that was very strong and important is the work with local communities, and how critical this work is, and if we're really going to be successful. Just so many wonderful things that you said. I would love to come and see this river restoration projects and the work you're doing on restoring wetlands and eco parks, and also biomining. Indeed, waste is a resource, so we definitely need to approach it and see it like that. Thank you so much, Subraya, for your fantastic comments and for joining us here today. And sorry about the earlier technical problems, but I'm very happy we have it resolved. And last but not least, for the final speaker in this session, we will now turn to Ming Yang, the Deputy Director of Development and Reform Commission from Chengdu, China. Chengdu's Park City approach has been successful in countering climate risks through innovative nature-based solutions. Can you tell us about this approach and how it contributed to Chengdu's overall carbon neutrality and climate resilience goals? And while you speak, just to remind everyone that please choose your language of interpretation. I believe the speaker will speak in Mandarin. Over to you, please.
谢谢主持人。
Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation. So by UNEP and ICLEI, in 2018, General Party Secretary Xi put forward the concept of the party city for the first time in Chengdu, and since then, and so we have building an ecological modern city with people as the center, integrating parks into city with nature, production, and the living space harmonically. Simply put, it is to build a city based on the current natural resources and realize the harmonious coexistence between human being and nature. Here, I would like to take this opportunity to briefly share two approaches of our park city to cope with the risk of the climate change. First, respect the natural background in the master plan. Chengdu is located in the west of China, in the upper reaches of the Yangtze River, with rich water and ecological resources. It is surrounded by the Longmen and the Longquanshan Mountain, and runs through the Minjiang and the Tuoxiang River. It has the largest artificial breeding population of a giant panda in the world. It is one of the few in the world that can overlook the snow-capped mountains in urban areas. In recent years, in order to meet the challenges of the urban expansion, natural resources limitation, and the green gas emission, we implement the differentiated zoning development strategy and draw three control lines with ecological protection, permanent basic farmland, and urban development boundary. while the first two spaces account for no less than 78%. We protect the ecological environment of the farmland and the giant panda habitat in the western part of the city, and develop the industry in the eastern part of the city. This is a master plan with multi-centers and cluster types. Take TOD and EOD as the guidance for our sustainable development. Establish the infrastructure to reduce the commuting distance, improve the urban operation efficiency, and control the carbon emission growth brought by human activities. Second, protect and restore nature. We introduce green into the city and enhance the carbon sink capacity. We plan to build an urban forest park of 1,000 square kilometers, a giant panda national park of 1,500 square kilometers, and Tianfu Greenway with 17,000 kilometers, and an ecological park of 500 meters on both sides of the express around the city, and build a Xinjiang Park along the mother river of the city Chengdu. At present, the city has completed the greening by 140,000 mu, the restoration of the giant panda habitat by 50,000 mu, 5,000 kilometers of greenways, and the completion of the ecological park around the city. The green coverage rate of the built-up area is 45%. The forest coverage rate is 40.3%. The forest stock is 36 million cubic meters, and the annual carbon sequestration exceeds 2 million tons. On the other hand, to introduce the wind into the city and improve the urban climate comfort, efforts are made to build a 3-level ventilation corridor. At the same time, we promote also source control, adjust industry structure, energy structure, and transportation structure, and effectively reduce the air pollution concentration. In 2021, the days with excellent air quality reached 299 days, where the snowy mountains can be seen for 70 days, making us known as the Park City under the Snow Mountain. We are confident that the goal of the CO2 peak and neutrality will be realized soon with our efforts. We are already so much better than the average levels of all the cities in China. So before I close my suggestion, I would like to say that we need the international cooperation. We hope that we can work together so we can learn from each other and to share with and cooperate with all of you. And finally, welcome to Chengdu City, land of abundance and the Park City on the Snow Mountain. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you much. Well, I'm very much looking forward to come to your city surrounded by snowy mountains. I just moved back to Stockholm in Sweden from Santiago in Chile, and also absolutely breathtaking to have a city surrounded by snowy mountains. So I definitely connect very well on that point. I also wanted to highlight when you spoke, Deputy Director, about scale and how everything is really advancing at scale, whether it's efforts to support forestry or address climate sequestration, as well as wind patterns, etc. So thank you so much for all your fantastic work and for being here with us today. To all the panelists in this section, noting that we did start a little bit late and your interventions were a little bit long, although extremely interesting. So I think we are going to actually have to move to the next panel just to respect the speakers that are coming afterwards. So I want to thank you so much for all of your comments, but much more so your efforts and actions on the ground. So with this, we will close this first panel, and I will now turn to our next panel on opportunities and challenges to scale up nature-based solutions in cities. And before introducing all the speakers, I will actually go directly to Ms. Rebecca Powell, who is a member of Parliament and Parliamentary Under Secretary of State and Minister for Nature Recovery and Domestic Environment at the UK Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Rebecca, thank you so much for being with us here today. The UK government is spurring action on nature at local level by developing guidelines and support programs to help cities act on nature. Can you tell us about these initiatives and the key elements that are accelerating action on the ground?
Yes, of course, and thank you so much. And actually, it's been fascinating to hear some of the previous speakers because we can learn so much, can't we, from what other people are doing. And it has made me want to go on a bit of a world tour to have a look at some of these projects. And thank you very much, Jennifer, for organising the event. One of my titles is Nature Recovery Minister. I'm the Environment Minister, but within that, Nature Recovery Minister. And I have a legal commitment to restore what we call species abundance by 2030. And of course, we've got to do it everywhere, including in our cities, our towns and our urban areas. So this is very pertinent, this event, to talk about these things. And of course, nature-based solutions are obviously a real key to tackling climate change and then tackling that other side of climate change, which is the nature crash that we've seen. But also there are so many benefits, aren't there, of introducing nature into our cities, not least the well-being benefits. So I'm just going to talk about a few of the initiatives that we are introducing that will, we believe, make a difference to improving and adding to our nature, all of which will apply in our cities. So one of those is our new mandatory biodiversity net gain mechanism. And this was introduced through our recently introduced Environment Act, which I brought through Parliament over the last 2 years. It's now an act. We're very proud of it. It's our biggest piece of legislation to have gone through our Parliament in about 2 decades, and it sets us on a sustainable trajectory for the future in everything, air, water, nature, waste and recycling. But the biodiversity net gain measure will require all new developments, housing, infrastructure and so forth, to put back 10% more nature than was there when they started. And so you can see what a difference that should automatically make to where we live, all of our cities, and bringing people much closer to nature. So that's one thing. And then also through this new act, we've also brought in a requirement for every local area, every local authority, to bring forward something called a local nature recovery strategy. So this is really, it's like I describe it as like a blanket that you, onto it, you put everything. You put what your land use is at the moment, where the development is, where you'd like the development, where you need the green spaces. So it's going to inform where the nature should go. And we see that as a really important tool in tackling climate change, adaptation, mitigation, water pollution and all sorts, because we will know what we need to put where. And then we're also providing support to local authorities, developers and communities through a green infrastructure framework for England. And we'll be launching that later on this year. And it's being developed by Natural England, which are the government's advisors for the natural environment in England. And that actually will be in partnership with other departments across government, whether it's transport, health, environment, sports, culture, because of course, as others on the call will know, it shouldn't just be the responsibility of the environmental department to green our cities and so forth. We need all of our government departments to do their bit, and we will be providing practical guidance through this framework for all of them and principles of good green infrastructure. Then also, I just wanted to touch quickly on urban trees. Obviously, they're really, really important, and particularly in terms of mitigating climate change. And also that one or two others have referred to it, you know, the well-being benefits we get, don't we, from being near a tree. I mean, my flat in London, when I had to find a flat to rent when I became a member of Parliament, I said I had to be able to see a tree from the window because it just makes you feel better. And so, of course, we've brought in a range of different funds to encourage urban tree planting on small scales or one-off standard trees. And we've also got an initiative for community forests, many of which will be bordering on our city areas, because so that people can have lots of people can have access to them. And we've also, through our net zero strategy, launched our Nature for Climate Fund. So that's a £750 million fund that we've launched and we're using specifically to tackle climate change through tree planting. We've got a really big tree planting programme, and also actually through peatland restoration work. And actually lots of these areas border right on our big city urban areas. So there are lots of additional spin-offs that we get from that work. I would just say as well, I'm working increasingly closely with our education minister, because we have to teach our children, don't we, about these things? Because if they don't learn to love these things and if they don't understand them, why would they care about them? So that to me is a very important element of all. There's no good just us talking to each other, we grown-ups. You know, we do need to get our kids hooked in, don't we? And I know lots of them are, but let's do it from the start. So lots of those things. And just very quickly, internationally, as everybody knows, 50% of the world's population lives in urban areas. We've got this increasingly vulnerable communities because of sea level rise and water security problems, extreme heats, all of those issues. And we know that they're going to accelerate. And that's why we're very proud to be a core donor of the City for Forests initiative. And that's delivered by the World Resources Institute, which Jennifer's nodding her head. She knows all about that, I'm sure. And that supports a range of projects assisting cities across the world to navigate access to finance, technical assistance for nature-based solutions, and rolling out the Partner Forest Programme to connect cities and forests and develop these partnerships between tropical forests, communities, and nearby cities. I think it's a really great initiative. And the UK has invested in it, I think, demonstrating our commitment to that, because I think that's something very important that we can do on the bigger scale. So I think I'll leave it there, Jennifer. So that's a bit of a run round what's going on here in the UK. Love to show some of our contributors around if they come here. But I'll leave it at that. I think I've got time for a couple of questions if anybody wanted to ask before I have to go out, because we've got some serious flooding in our country and I've got to go and deal with that.
Definitely seen the news. Well, first of all, I just want to say congratulations on this biodiversity net gain mechanism. A huge effort and very successful, it sounds like, and on all that you've done to increase nature in local development and also supporting local governments on this. I mean, my job as a moderator here is such a pleasure because you guys are all so inspiring to me. And I just wanted to really commend the work that you're doing to connect with the education and create that love, because I think if we don't have that love, how are we going to convince people that this, or young people, that the world that they're inheriting, it can be full of hope, and that connection is so important. And I do know that we have quite a few participants that have been mentioning Cities for Forest in the chat box as well, so I think they will be happy to have you. acknowledge that. I think, if there is it's great that you offered to take another question or two. I don't know if anyone wants to just pop something in the chat. Please do so. But I just wanted to, very much thank you for all of your work in the UK and also the collaboration with different cities around the world. And also just, with the UK government at the Glasgow Climate COP. From WWF side, one of the things that we saw as a real highlight was the link between climate and nature that was put.
Yes, absolutely. I didn't mention that, but we were so proud to be involved in really strengthening that link, working with all the others and all the other countries, because you can see how much synergy there is there.
Excellent. Well, I have just gotten a note from our organizers that our next speaker is also in a hurry. So if anyone wants to just mind the chat, but otherwise, thank you so much, Rebecca. It's been
Absolute
a real pleasure. And now it is my great pleasure to hand over to Kunal Kumar, the Joint Secretary of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs in India. So we're very happy to have you also join us. And to Kunal, can I just ask a question to you about the rapid urbanization underway in India? And your ministry is helping to shape over 4,000 cities and towns to cope with this and deliver improved services and livability. How is the ministry driving urban expansion and protecting nature in cities at the same time? Based on your experience, what are the key policy levers to scale up nature in cities? The floor is yours, Kunal.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure listening to the Honourable Minister from UK and also listening to other participants before her. And I think we are debating a very fundamental topic. We are discussing a very fundamental topic to the future of each one of us. I think the context for India is even more serious because we are kind of at the cusp of rapid urbanization going forward. Currently, by the way we measure urbanization in our country, we are around 40% urban. Around 400 million people living in urban areas, which is around 35% urban. But if you use the Mexican definition, or if you use definitions used by many other countries, we are already 65% urban. And this number is going to grow phenomenally in the next 2 decades. We may have people of the size of an entire USA coming into our urban areas over the next 2 decades, which is around 300 million people. Now, in this context, we, in a way, with the kind of development objectives our cities have, the kind of aspirations that our people have, we have to chart a very climate sensitive, environmentally acceptable, a long-term sustainable model of urbanization. Otherwise, there's not going to be, something that will go wrong only for our country. It will actually go wrong for the whole world because there's a lot of people that we are talking about. And we are very conscious of that fact. We at 3 levels of government, both at the level of the federal government, the state governments, and also at the level of the city governments, are working together through what we call the Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework. And each of the cities, measure their outcomes on climate parameters and are able to then nudge their actions to suitably meet the gaps that they find out from that assessment. So as part of that work, we have multiple different dimensions of activity. One of the areas that I wanted to focus on in this presentation is about reducing urban heat. But otherwise, about 5 different pillars of work that we are doing together at the 3 levels of government. One is, of course, mobility and air quality. The second work is around green buildings, energy efficiency, and so on and so forth. Third is around urban planning, biodiversity, and those levers. Fourth, around smart water, wastewater management, and the fifth is around smart waste management, and the entire gamut of activities around that. So urban heat is the topic which I'll be focusing on for today's discussion. And so I'll basically just take you quickly through these slides. And are my slides moving?
They are indeed.
Yeah, good, fine. So yes, this is something that comes from science that what happens to humans when they experience, the kind of heat environments that we are experiencing now. And this is going to go worse from all likelihood that we see from the kind of data that is coming in. And therefore, we need to consciously prepare our cities to be able to mitigate and adapt to such circumstances. Uh, if you see in India today, building sector is growing very fast, and one of the ways I can define this, or maybe make it very, very visually, is that uh, what we are seeing is probably the in every decade we will build will almost build a city of the size of Chicago. That's the kind of building infrastructure, the built up infrastructure that is getting created uh, every decade in the country. And this is going to grow over time, and as people move in, as the structural transformation of the economy takes place, a lot of this is going to increase. And potential that is there uh, to stop um, certain really catastrophic energy consumption levels to happen is tremendous. So we see this as an opportunity in the country, and we are working at the three levels of government to ensure that we convert this into an opportunity. And therefore, we're looking at how do we look at technologies and methodologies by which we can reduce this energy consumption that is going to happen in the building sector. That is a given. Building sector is going to grow is a given, but how do we reduce energy consumption per capita or built up space? And so we have multiple multi-tiered programs and approach to this entire problem. One is, of course, how do we increase the performance of energy systems? Then energy efficiency, renewable energy, use of renewable energy is one strong area of work in our urban areas. How do we incorporate this entire business of cooling and energy efficiency in the plans that we create for our cities and our sustainable development plans that we create for our cities? And then a broader measure at the district level, and both for adaptation as well as mitigation at the regional and the district levels. So this is the way we look at the strategies for urban cooling. Uh, Again, if you see, a lot of action has started to happen in the country on all these parameters. Cscaf is essentially an acronym for the Climate Smart Cities Assessment Framework, and under that, we've created a systemic effort of a lot of experts and organizations and partner agencies and cities and mayors and the commissioners for each of these cities working together. And we've seen, as the framework has just grown over the last 2 years, 35 new cities have started preparing their disaster management plans. There were a lot of other cities who have done that in the past. Cities are actually developing, urban cooling and other critical plans for themselves. A lot of these cities are looking at how do they, dovetail their resilience and climate sensitive climate change plans into their day-to-day the urban planning framework, and so on and so forth. This is one area of work which is being focused upon. And then and I'm talking only on the subset of the 100 cities. This is a case study I'm presenting for the 100 cities which are part of the smart cities framework. India has around 5,000 cities. So this is just a case study based presentation on the 100 cities. So before, there were hardly any cities in this 100 who were actually doing air quality monitoring in their cities. Now 87 cities have full-fledged air quality monitoring systems, and they are reporting data, and they are actually sharing data with each other, learning from each other, and we are kind of anchoring this entire process to make things happen in a quicker and faster way, and in a more scalable way. And and the third topic of emphasis is greening, energy efficiency, and renewable energy, where the promotion of green spaces, energy efficient systems like street lights, water pumping stations. In fact, over the last 3 years, we've been able to replace around 1 point, sorry, uh, 10, 11 million street lights have been replaced over the last 3 years itself into smart lights and LED lights, which has seen a lot of emissions in our cities. Then renewable energy is being taken up. Cities are striving to ensure at least 10%, if not 20. Some of them are striving for 20. At least 10% of the energy that is consumed in cities comes from renewable energy. Uh, then looking at building energy performance and green building standards, LEED standards. There are multiple different standards that have come in this essentially to ensure that our building energy performance improves. And almost all the cities have, in fact, cities well beyond the 100 have now started taking it up, and we are seeing good traction on this one. Then so this is the work that is happening on the 5 verticals of urban cooling that I just wanted to take up as a specific subject on this discussion. However, as the question that you posed to me is about overall, how do we look at the climate, the work on climate that our cities are doing in India? I would just say that we have a very strong climate envelope in all the efforts that are being put in, especially by the federal government and also the states and the cities. Uh, um, we have seen the traction towards these being very slow in the past. I would agree, because um, ultimately it's very difficult to push public value over private value. But our cities have started to learn the methodologies to do so, the economics to do so. I think it all depends on how we are able to get sustainable finance. It also depends on how we build proper governance structures to handle climate in our climate as a subject in our cities, which is a horizontal cuts across all different departments, the silos that cities normally function in. And we're also looking at technology, breeding startups, innovation in the field of climate, which is where, for example, we just have run a very successful grand challenge on air quality systems in the country, and we intend to do many more of such efforts. We're also looking at building a bridge between people who want to do it and people who have the knowledge to do it. So there is a climate practitioners network that has been established. There's a whole lot of capacity building initiatives that is being done. A learning platform has been created where a lot of engagement is happening between city leaders and experts in the sectors of energy, mobility, and so on and so forth. So there are multiple dimensions in which all this work is going on, and I'm hopeful that with the with strong commitment from all these levels of government, with strong partnerships with the member organizations from India and abroad, we would be able to actually showcase to the world how climate sensitive development in urban areas of the kind that we are doing in India can actually be a successful model for other countries to follow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kunal, and also for putting your presentation in a wider context with the Climate Smart Cities program that you have done so well in India, and also connecting it to all of these other sectors, whether it be mobility, air quality, green buildings, energy efficiency, renewables, nature-based solutions as well. So I think the systemic approach is what we need. And I commend you for your fantastic efforts in India. It's no small feat. A lot of cities to work with, a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities. So thank you so much for your intervention. I know that our next speaker is eager to join us, so I'm actually going to go right over to the executive mayor of the city of Cape Town in South Africa, Jordan Hill Lewis. And the city of Cape Town has pledged to invest $4.25 million between 2021 and 2024 to deliver watershed restoration activities. What is the goal of the project, and how is the city leveraging funds to deliver on this ambitious nature-based solution? It's a challenge. There's been a lot of great programs, a lot of fantastic speakers, but I have no doubt that the city of Cape Town will provide with us some fantastic examples. Mayor, are you available?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine. I see you as well. Fantastic.
Lovely. What a pleasure it is to join you. Thank you so much for the kind invitation, and hello to all of my very honored colleagues and guests. This is a very exciting program that I'm really keen on, because as you know, from the devastating drought that we had a few years ago, Cape Town is a very water sensitive part of the world. It is becoming progressively drier. And so we have to get more and more creative about how we can work with nature to preserve and conserve our water supply. And we considered many very, very expensive projects like desalination, new dams, and some of those water recycling, and some of those we are still pursuing. But actually, of all of those projects, the one that is most cost effective and yields some of the best results in terms of water saving is simply clearing alien vegetation, which is very water intensive, clearing alien vegetation from our water catchment areas. And so we have cleared thousands of hectares already, and it's going really well. And the yield from that investment, only about $4.5 million a year, is a staggering 55 billion liters of water each year. In other words, several months of water supply for Cape Town's entire population, simply from clearing alien vegetation. Now we know that that's not enough. We've still got a lot more to do. There's about 54,000 hectares that still have to be cleared, and we can increase that yield to about 100 billion, double the yield to about 100 billion liters of water, and all of that will cost us somewhere in the region of about 25 to 30 million US dollars, a truly tiny investment given the scale of that yield. It also creates about 350 jobs for alien clearers in the city. And it is quite an extraordinary success story. It is just to give you an idea, the water yield is 1/10 of the cost of the next cheapest option in terms of saving water for the city of Cape Town. And so we are hugely grateful for the expertise that have been poured in, the financial resources that have been poured into this. There's been some donor money as well. We're very grateful for that, and the success story is really a very exciting one for the city of Cape Town, and something that we're certainly going to carry on investing in the coming years, so that we can still have adequate water supply, regardless of how much urbanization happens and how much drier our city is getting over the years and decades. Thank you.
Jordan, that is very interesting, and certainly we all watched carefully the water crisis a few years back in Cape Town, and I think what struck the most was the learning points that the city has come to, and also what it can offer to other cities in similar challenges. You talked a lot about the clearing of alien vegetation. Can I just double check, has there been a focus then on planting local resilient climate adaptive species in the process also, just to clarify?
Yeah, there has. So when we talk about alien vegetation, we're mainly talking about pine trees, gum trees, and wattle, which are very water heavy. They're particularly prolific in around our catchment areas and watershed areas around the catchment dams. So we're trying to replace those with, we have an extraordinary diversity of indigenous flora here, and that is what we in South Africa refer to as fynbos. It really is incredibly beautiful and diverse, and so we are slowly replacing the alien vegetation with that and restoring those catchment areas to their original state, and that is having the success that I spoke of earlier.
Absolutely brilliant, and another great case study of how we can relearn with nature in order to tackle some of the coming challenges, whether it be climate change or biodiversity loss, pollution, and certainly equity. I know equity has been a big part of your portfolio, addressing job improvements, and I know you said 350 jobs were created in process of this. Wow.
That's right. Yeah, 350 permanent jobs with alien vegetation clearers.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Mayor Hill Lewis, and to your beautiful work that you're doing in the fantastic city of Cape Town. So real pleasure to hear some of the wonderful work you're doing today. Thank you. So we are moving right along, and one speaker to the next, incredibly fascinating and interesting works on intervention, leaving me very hopeful. Next, I'd like to turn to Ingrid Gabriella Hoven, who is a member of the management board of the German development agency, GIZ, a big supporter of a lot of this work. GIZ implements projects for the German government that support cities around the world to take ambitious action to design and redesign urban areas with nature in mind. Can you tell us, Ingrid, about some of these initiatives and why these efforts are furthering the core objectives of the German government? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jennifer. First, for your kind introduction, let me start by actually applauding UNEP and his team for this exciting event that I have been following the whole morning. And I'm also honored to be on this distinguished panels and to share with you a couple of thoughts and lessons learned out of our broader portfolio that you have just introduced. Actually, perhaps as a preliminary remark, let me underline that we have been following closely UNEP's work on nature-based solutions, especially the report that was introduced by Martina this morning that was presented to the G20 Italian presidency. I think this is really a landmark paper that is going to give guidance to many actors in the international field. And we were also proud to partner with UNEP and the World Economic Forum on another report that was quite important, the report on the State of Finance report, which actually indicated quite clearly what is needed in financial terms actually to turn the tide. The report's message is clear, and it says that public and private investments need to at least triple by 2030 from the current levels to 350 billion annually. So one may ask, is this really needed? Is it a good investment? I think the many good examples that we have heard throughout the morning indicate that this is really an investment that pays off in terms of employment generated, in terms of livelihood saved, and in terms of a higher climate resilience ambition level that can be achieved with small investment. So let me perhaps quickly share with you the priorities of the German government with respect to green urban development. This has been a priority for quite some decades, but the new government that took office in December 2021 actually has placed climate and nature protection at the very center of its domestic and international priorities. And these are also reflected in the policy priorities of Germany's G7 presidency, which we are going to hold this year in 2022. The German government wants to drive forward international cooperation in climate and environment protection, healthcare, and urban development policies specifically. And the particular focus of the presidency will be on the promotion of sustainable infrastructure and, I quote, on shaping the urban lives of citizens in a sustainable manner. As it is primarily in cities that the success or failure of climate and environment and development goals will be decided, the German Development Cooperation Ministry, BMZ, has placed sustainable urban development as a central field of action in its new core strategy called Responsibility to Our Planet, launched last year. With this, the German Development Cooperation follows a very comprehensive approach. Integrated planning, adequate municipal finance, sustainable construction, and nature-based solutions are considered as the key enablers, as well as sustainable transportation and circular economy. So this is a kind of approach that is being pursued. It's not a single focused one, but it's really a comprehensive integrated approach. The same applies for the Federal Ministry for Environment and Consumer Protection, which is in charge of the International Climate Initiative that has actually developed a huge portfolio on developing strategies for sustainable and climate-friendly and resilient urban development and biodiversity since 2015. And the same integrated approach is being pursued in this respect. What does this mean? Integrated approaches. That normally we not only work on one specific area like heating or CO2 reduction or adaptation to climate change, but we try to combine this in a way that we equally address economic issues that are core and center for cities, as well as social issues. We work on social cohesion, and we try really to pursue the principle of the Agenda 2030 to leave no one behind. So this is what we understand as an integrated approach. Let me give you, perhaps, if still times allow, two specific project examples of partnerships that are, I think, quite unique, but also quite representative for the portfolio that we actually develop with our partner countries and local governments. This project is implemented in South Africa. We have just heard a wonderful example from Cape Town. I would like to share an example of eThekwini, which is next to Durban. And this program is being delivered, commissioned by the BMZ, the Development Cooperation Ministry. And it has been financed and developed by the so-called C40 finance facility. So what do? We assist the city in scaling up their project for community-based resilient river management. So we work on river management, and the management is being extended from 300 kilometers to 1,000 kilometers, and adapting more than 7,000 kilometers of streams and rivers so that they can actually absorb better flooding, but also drought and higher temperatures. But at the same time, while we work on this river management in the city and around the city, at the same time, we created 16,000 jobs. And furthermore, the measures facilitates a cross-departmental steering structure and cooperation, so that actually this type of working together, a whole of government approach at the city level also can be learned and be considered as a best practice to deal with these very important challenges. But as you see, two sides of one coin, the protection against heat and floods, but at the same time, we create jobs. Second example stems from Latin America. One Latin American example from Costa Rica. Costa Rica for many years really has been a role model on many nature-based solutions. And therefore, I'm very proud to share this project example with you, which has been financed by the ICI facility. The project is called Biodiversity and is supporting public authorities, the private sector and civil society in their efforts to integrate ecosystem services and inter-urban biocorridors, or as we call it, green and blue belts, into sustainable city planning. So this project also exemplifies what has been said by Stuart at the very beginning, that what is needed when we want to address climate and nature at the same time, we need whole of government approaches to make it work. And exactly in Costa Rica, this has happened. And additionally, what I wanted to share with you is actually you can do a good planning. You can increase capacities in academia and think tanks, in the planning structure, in departments, in specific metropolitan areas. But is this really sufficient, or do we need specific financial incentives to make it work? And in Costa Rica, I found this quite striking that they decided to establish a green urban fund, which exclusively actually provides the type of investments or additional incentives, financial incentives, to fund green and blue infrastructure. Which says this is at least, if funding is easier available than for grey infrastructure, it may actually make it also easier to mobilize the private sector to go in those areas that still may be perceived too risky or a little bit unknown, so they have to familiarize themselves how to deal with it. And I think this type of specific investment incentives may be an additional tool and vehicle really to scale up activities. So in closing, Jennifer, I think the experience of the many projects that we are implementing and the ones that we have actually get to know this morning showcase the many opportunities that are out there to scale up nature-based solutions in cities, it is doable. And in our view, nature-based solution actually not only delivers significant multiple benefits for climate mitigation and adaptation as well for biodiversity. Actually, I think they are a triple win opportunity. They are actually, when we scale up nature-based solution, we can deal with the economic, the social, and the sustainability challenges at the same time. And by doing so, actually give cities and municipalities a better opportunity to increase the welfare and the livelihoods within cities. So for me, a nature-based solution in city is a triple win that we should pursue more forcefully. Thank you.
What a great way to end your comment, Ingrid, and it's so great to see you here today. I'm going to quote you: an investment that pays off, and we can't agree more. I want to commend you and the German government for all that you've been doing, both to invest in this area, but also to really lift it and prioritize it among other governments as well, as and showing us that this is really the way forward. And thank you for all your work putting climate and nature at the center of both domestic and international priorities. Dear colleagues, we are running behind. We did start a little behind, but I'm going to go straight to the next speaker just to respect as much as possible the timing. But I've been so enjoying all of these different interventions. So thank you, Ingrid, for all the work you're doing, and also for bringing a Latin American example into this, because it's quite early for that part of the world. So it's, inspiration is coming from all different corners of our world. And now we're actually going to travel back to China. And we will hear from Kung Jian Yu, who is the president of Turnscape and founding dean and professor of the Peking University College of Architecture and Landscape Architecture, regarding a different facet of dealing with climate vulnerability. And this is certainly not a last but not least of the speakers, because this is a very exciting example. Professor, your ecological approach to urbanism and your sponge city theory has been implemented in over 200 cities in China and beyond. What have been the benefits of your efforts in these urban areas, and what do you see as key obstacles and challenges, as well as opportunities, for cities and urban planners to scale this approach up in other cities? Very excited to hear your intervention. Over to you.
Jennifer, thank you so much. I really totally agree with Ingrid's the idea about our approach should be integrated. It's holistic. We have ecological, social, economical benefit. Now, so I just want to show you that how actually we have tested this nature-based solution, and certainly you will see it's working, and it's really replicable. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Yeah. So the idea I'm going to propose is we call a sponge city, to have an ecological infrastructure. When we are talking about climate change and also problems, we have all these great infrastructure solutions. But remember, we have to understand that with climate change, we have to remain skeptical to anything we have achieved that define what we call the civilization, and be ready to change everything. Now that's, I think we need a totally new idea about infrastructure. Now this infrastructure is of course nature-based and holistic, and it must be free. So this is, so all the challenges we're talking of: flood, drought, pollution, habitat loss, and lack of public space. So conventional solution is to invest in stronger and more powerful great infrastructure, more concrete, damming, flood walls, channelizing the river, more complicated sewage plant. All this can be necessary to solve urgent individual problems, but it consumes a huge amount of energy, concrete, destroy nature's resiliency, lacks resiliency itself, have no resilience at all, and sometimes, and more often actually, accumulates higher risk of disaster. So the nature-based solution is an alternative. It's ecological infrastructure, which is critical for securing the ecosystem services. Now, this holistic idea is ecosystem services, and woven together as a great infrastructure. We know how to do it. most of the city know how to do it, green infrastructure. But how to integrate this nature-based solution to provide all these free services. And this infrastructure, water is a key. That's why I call it sponge city. A city built on water-centered ecological infrastructure is called sponge city. Its philosophy, now important, its philosophy is to retain water, slow down water flow, clean water by nature, and be adaptive to nature, which is totally opposite to the conventional gray solution. And this infrastructure must be planned and be built across the scale, from national to regional to the community levels. For 25 years, we have tested and built over more than 500 projects in more than 200 cities and developed several replicable models. Flood adaptation, for example. Imagine how much money we invested in trying to build a flood wall to protect the city from being flooded. But each year, flood become more and more serious. We have to end this kind of never-ending war based on or depending on great infrastructure. Now, this is the case in my own hometown in Zhejiang's Jinhua city. We actually removed the concrete flood wall and terracing the riverbank and let water come into the city and let part of the city get flooded because it is monsoon season, monsoon climate. So flood only come just a week or even a couple of days. Now, this is a 20-year flood, that's a 100-year flood, and the city become more resilient. What about the storm water, urban inundation? We are talking about the flood happen locally. Over 65% of Chinese cities get urban inundation every year. Now, this is the case. We actually introduced this called sponge idea. The sponge city build a green sponge which are resilient to the monsoon climate. This was the existing site. You can see in Sanya, Hainan Island. Now, this is today very simple technique based on cut and fill farming technology, and we successfully transformed the whole city into a sponge resilient city. And by the way, the property value just double in 2 years. So you can see how much property get developed just in 3 years in this area. Now, what about water pollution? Remember, 85% of global sewage actually go to the sea without treated. This is a case, particularly in developing countries and particularly in the monsoon region. Now remember, the nature-based solution can remove the nutrient from this polluted water through the biological process. And this pollutant actually fertilizes. So just by recycling the nutrient, we can actually create clean water, but at the same time produce biomass and a beautiful park. Now this is how the clean water gets created. And we tested for 10 years. 85% of nutrient, total nitrogen and phosphorus, can be removed by this constructed wetland. And this can be very effective solution for larger scale water issues like the Bohai Sea, more than 700,000 kilometers in size, heavily polluted, basically a dead sea. Now that was a site. This is a pilot project, become a sponge, catch the chemical runoff from the agricultural field and from the urban area. And this is a very successful pilot project. Now, what about the storm? We have more and more severe storm, which means we have to build a stronger flood wall like this. This is another case in Sanya in China's Hainan Island. No, not necessary. Like Stuart just mentioned, mangrove maybe have a better solution to solve this problem. So actually, we remove such a strong flood wall made of concrete and let the salty water coming into the land and meet the fresh water and create a interlocking habitat, become a sponge, resilient flood protective river and ocean shoreline. So I'm talking about the healing the city through as whole infrastructure, not just a single project. This is another case. For example, about 10-mile length river in Hainan Island, suffering monsoon climate, flood and pollution and lack of public space. Now, for 20 years, the government just tried to solve the problem by conventional gray infrastructure. Now we actually take a totally different solution. Remove the concrete, terracing the riverbank, catch the urban runoff, and manage this, become a resilient stormwater management infrastructure and clean water at the same time. And at the same time, we create a beautiful park for the people, have social benefit, and increasing the property value along the river. So more than ever, we have to rethink the way we build our cities and the way we treat water and nature, and even the way we define civilization. By protecting and restoring the ecological infrastructure, we are able to secure and make wise use of nature's services for the benefit, holistic benefit for the planet and the welfare of the people and the city. But the obstacle here also very strong. The obstacle is the business as usual model, fear of flood, gray infrastructure based on pseudoscience. Now we have so many models, scientific models, so-called scientific models, but they are fake and pseudo. But we depend so much on this kind of so-called science and engineering. The second obstacle is the established technology of gray infrastructure, and the commercial interest interlocked with them. How strong this kind of commercial interest linked into this established gray infrastructure. And the third obstacle is the bureaucracy. Bureaucracy built on the technocratic system, and the obstacle and the obsolete code system, which is based on so-called science. But those science actually, I will say, partly at least pseudoscience. So my suggestion is immediately we need action is to be innovative. Like the mayors we just met here, must be innovative to break through the business as usual model, which means the gray infrastructure based on the pseudo or fake science, and try to make friends with flood and drought and anything, which means make friends with nature, to do some experiment to showcase the alternative. The second midterm action is to make a master plan for a regional nature-based ecological infrastructure to systematically and holistically target at all problems, not just one single problem, and provide holistic ecosystem services, changing policies for financing and to encourage nature-based restoration. And immediately we have to change the code system, which is obsolete. And the third, my advice is long-term, to change the intellectual infrastructure, including education values. So to conclude, we have to understand that with climate change, we have to remain skeptical to anything we have achieved that define what we call civilization, and to be ready to change everything. Jennifer, thank you.
Professor, thank you. I have long been a fan of the Sponge City concept, and I think you've made a lot of other fans here today if they weren't already familiar. I just wanted to highlight two things that really stood out to me. Water as key to ecological infrastructure. This is critical, and to use that water and changing rainfall patterns as an asset when we're talking about this. I also note that some of these projects, the property value doubled. So we're seeing that this is an investment in ecological infrastructure, but it comes back financially as well, as Ingrid also mentioned. And I wanted to comment, I love your book, Standing Behind. I can imagine that's no small accident. Everything needs to change. And you have demonstrated so many fantastic examples of change and positive repercussions because of that. So thank you so much for all of your work, and I hope to see you in coming presentations, continuing to inspire not only cities in China, but around the globe. And now we are going finally to closing, and we have the great challenge for Andy Deacon, who is the Acting Managing Director of the Global Covenant of Mayors, to deliver closing remarks from all of these inspiring speakers. Andy, this is going to be a difficult task, but I definitely think that you're up for it. And thank you so much, Professor, for all of your work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Thank you, Jennifer, and to all of our panelists today. You really do represent the local, national, and international leaders working together to ensure that the benefits of nature reach urban dwellers really all across the world, and are working to improve lives and livelihoods for all. Thank you for all of the work that you're all doing and for taking the time out today to share that experience with us. Look, you've heard a lot of statistics during the course of the session, but effectively they boil down, in my view, to a couple of things. Cities and the hundreds of millions of people living and working in them are already extremely vulnerable to the impacts of the climate crisis. And we've heard about everything from drought to heat to wildfires to storm surges and rising sea levels. And often we've also heard that it's a city's most vulnerable communities that are the most exposed to climate risk, and they lack complex disaster planning. It's also clear that the problem isn't going to resolve itself. Every year, cities see 67 million new urban dwellers, with the most rapid urbanization taking place in the global south. And we know that the world's cities are heating up at twice the global average rate. So the problem really is not going to kind of solve it itself. And it's clear from what we've heard today that cities' infrastructure is increasingly under pressure, and there is vulnerability to disruption in critical supplies, whether that's food and medicine or consumer goods. And you've heard some good news today that kind of counters that. It is in cities where more nature-based solutions can be deployed to increase resilience, to improve the well-being of citizens, and again, to help play a part in tackling the climate crisis. So we at the Global Covenant of Mayors, together with UNEP, RMI, Mission Innovation, and the Clean Cooling Collaborative, developed a new guide called Beat the Heat, that was launched at COP26 last year, and it offers city planners an encyclopedia of proven options to help cool cities and adapt to rising temperatures. And what's clear from the plethora of case studies within that document, and again from what we've heard today, is that nature is a big part of the solution, can tackle multiple challenges while also helping to reduce emissions in cities. And a number of our speakers have provided compelling examples of the ability to tackle both improving resilience, but also sources of emissions as well. So it's time to flip the script and make green the new normal. And I'm calling on all partners and attendees here today to make this their motto and to help spread that word far and wide. At the Global Covenant, we're working with cities and partners, a number of whom are represented here today, to accelerate the uptake of these solutions. And very clear, and one of the key messages I want to reinforce is a number of people have continually come back to the urgency for immediate action. We need to radically collaborate to demonstrate the power of nature to counter climate impacts, but we need everybody around the table. We need to work hand in hand with the private sector, with the finance community, with governments at all levels, including local leaders, to implement these solutions and to make peace with nature. And we're providing support to actively broker these partnerships and relationships. We're thrilled to be part of this kind of ecosystem of collaboration and hope that more partners will join us and others that we've heard from through the course of the session to leverage nature and to bring about the change that we need. So the Global Covenant's network of 11,500 plus cities across the globe is prepared to help national governments meet commitments that were made at COP26 and to scale up many of the solutions that we've heard about through the course of the session today. But we recognize that cities need additional powers and additional finance to meet those targets, and for city leaders to help keep their cities healthy and safe from the multiplying ravages of a rapidly warming world. And cities continue to need support from national governments to deliver climate action that addresses the climate crisis and does rapidly scale up the solutions that are available. We're working with a range of partners to try to close the investment gap. And we've heard from a number of speakers through the course of the session, both about the benefits as well as the economic cost of implementing these solutions. But we're working with this range of partners to implement nature-based solutions that will help to increase resilience, livability, as well as health in cities. But we must move fast. That message of urgency is very clear. We need to build on momentum coming out of the climate talks in Glasgow last November. And there really is a clear opportunity in advance of COP27 later this year for cities around the world to bring a stronger message than ever before, both on the importance of resilience and on the role of nature-based solutions as part of that, and to inspire partners in national government, the private sector, and across civil society to join us in acting in this way as well. So thank you again, Jennifer, for inspiring and moderating a great discussion. Thanks to all of our speakers for their inputs and insight. And we really welcome the partnership and collaboration, very much of which we've seen the spirit throughout each of the presentations through the course of the morning, and trust that we all leave both rejuvenated and recommitted to action and to implementation of nature-based cities. Nature-based solutions in cities throughout the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy, and what a fantastic way to close such an incredibly inspiring event. And I just want to highlight that the fantastic coordination from the UNEP Cities team that has put all of these wonderful speakers together, inspiration from start to finish. Stuart mentioned urgency. Andy mentioned urgency. Andy also mentioned the need to radically collaborate to really flip the script and put nature and people at the center of cities. I can't agree more from WWF's perspective. Our motto is together possible. We believe this is possible. We have heard the evidence from every speaker, all stakeholders on board, from finance to national government to cities and local governments. And Andy, thank you for all of your work in the Global Covenant and the 11,000 plus cities that you are working with. It's always a great pleasure to hear from you and the great work that you're doing. And also finally, to our audience, your patience. We are running late. We started late, we finished late, but these speakers have kept me on this edge of my chair, and I hope for all of you as well. I think as Irene from UNEP has mentioned, we are now going to break. So thank you, everyone, and wish you to come back and enjoy the rest of the sessions to follow.